Here's what's coming up on episode 127 of the Big Seance podcast. Theresa Cheung and Dr. Julia Mossbridge.
Precognition is something that is so normal and so common and just isn't talked about. And it's so scientifically defensible that I'm looking forward to not very long from now when people will be using it as a normal part of their vocabulary, and they'll be using the information they get through precognition as a normal part of their lives to make their lives better.
Actually training and working through it actually will help you and improve your intuition and everything. And being a precog in training is just as valuable in my mind as someone who actually will make the Hall of Fame, because some people will.
Theresa, I will always forever remember Julia's visual of the afterlife as a vegetable soup. I love it.
This is what I had to put up with when we were writing.
Never would I have ever had that visual in my mind, and it's now going to always be there. Thank you.
Next time you have vegetable soup. Yes. No. Yeah. No.
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
In the groundbreaking book, The Premonition Code, The Science of Precognition, How Sensing the Future Can Change Your Life, best-selling author Theresa Cheung joins forces with cognitive neuroscientist Julia Mossbridge, Ph.D., director of the Innovation Lab at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, often known as IONS. Together, they reveal revolutionary new research showing that sensing the future is possible. They also provide practical tools and techniques you can use to help gain insight into your own life. Theresa Cheung returns today. She has a master's from King's College, Cambridge, and has spent the last 20 years writing best-selling books and encyclopedias about the psychic world. 2 of her paranormal titles reached the Sunday Times top 10, and her international bestseller, The Dream Dictionary, regularly bounces to number 1 on the Amazon Dreams bestsellers chart. Dr. Julia Mossbridge, Ph.D., is a cognitive neuroscientist and director of the Innovation Lab at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and visiting scholar in psychology at Northwestern University. She is the author of Transcendent Mind, one of the first academic books to examine paranormal experiences, published by the American Psychological Association in 2016. Her research focus at IONS is precognition and the possibility of time travel. So, Julia, welcome to the Parlor, and Theresa, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having us.
I'm so excited. I got to read what I often call a magic copy of the book, since it's not out yet. And that was a couple months back, and I very, very much enjoyed it. And I was excited to see that my eyes didn't cross as much as I thought they would reading it.
Good.
It was relatively friendly to read for people who are not scientists, very much so.
Oh, we hope so. That was the aim.
Yeah, well, you did a good job at that, I could tell.
Oh, thank you.
The preface of your book, The Premonition Code, is by previous guest of the show, Lloyd Auerbach. And there's a foreword by Dr. Dean Radin. And if that wasn't enough, you have a testimonial from the Deepak Chopra included in the book.
And the Patrick Keller.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Who can forget?
I was so very honored to be asked to give a testimonial after reading that magic copy. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Thank you.
But I just wanted to read Deepak's testimonial. Deepak says, this book is a major contribution in our understanding of reality and the dormant potential for the so-called supernormal that exists within all of us. Read it and discover the power of time within your mind. So how did this collaboration come together with you two?
Good question. I've known Julia and admired her research for several years, but I only got in touch with her about 3 years ago, I think now, because I wanted to interview her for one of my books, because I was really looking for scientists who are actually studying seriously what I've been writing about for 20 years from an anecdotal perspective. And Julia's just stood out because it was so striking, her research and what she was doing, and so fascinating, and her fascination with dreams. And she will talk all about her research. I'm not going to, because I'm not an academic scientist, so I won't be able to express it as well. But it was just so powerful. And I wanted my readers to know, for all those people who say to me, oh, this is all, you're making it up, or it's all belief, that no, there is genuine science out there right now researching it, and in some cases proving it.
So that's exactly, yeah. Theresa reached out to me, and I thought, wow, a best-selling author wants to hear about my work. That's kind of amazing. And then we just developed a friendship and worked on another project together. And then out of the blue, I was sitting in a hotel at some conference, and I read my WhatsApp, which is how we communicate because she's in London and I'm in the States. And she says, so look, I've told some folks at a publishing company that we were going to do a book on precognition together. And what do you think of that? I said, okay. She said, they're very interested. They're very excited. And I said, great. You know, I who am I to
yeah, I mean, you've got to realize, you know, what this is because, you know, Julia works in a world of scientific and academic rigor. And it's just been as hard for her, I think, to work in the way that I might work as it has been for me to look at how she works. Do you see what I mean? Because what I'm trying to do here, Patrick, is to show people the science. Otherwise, it just, as the book says, you know, it'll stay hidden.
Yeah.
And it won't go out to a larger audience. And that's what I'm really hoping this will do, that it will make people aware this research is happening. Because whenever I talk about it, people just don't know.
Right. And, you know, I mean, I had just come off of publishing with Iman Sparou's Transcendent Mind. And of course, that's a completely different book. It's basically a textbook, and it's written for graduate students and stuff. It's like $70 or something. And Theresa was aware that people weren't, you know, most people were not going to buy that or understand it if they did buy it. And she wanted to help me communicate to a larger audience. And she did. I mean, she taught me. I would write something and she would say, okay, it's really nice, but because she's very nice. She would say, it's very nice, but no one will understand it. And then she would change it thus and so. And I would read it and I would say, oh, right, this is so much more approachable. And so you could actually see in the book several times where we actually decided to put our little arguments. Theresa says, Julia says, Theresa says, but they have to hear this. And Julia says, but what about this? And, you know, so it makes it sort of fun.
You're talking to normal, you know, nerds here, Julia. So
exactly.
So, and I have to tell you, this is only the second time I've bravely approached this topic. I remember having the opportunity to do a couple of episodes on precognition and things like that. And I also am not a academic or a scientist. And so I wasn't very brave until I had someone who, you know, I'm assuming Marty Rosenblatt on the show recently. And I'm so glad I did, because he blew a lot of my listeners away, and me too. And I know because I heard from many of them after his episode. And so I could tell that there was this like thirst for learning more about this. He was talking about the universe of collective consciousness and now moments. And I had like a moment when he was talking about the moments of now and all of that. It was very cool. So now I'm like, hey, I know my audience, you know, wants to hear more about this. So I'm excited for them to hear it.
Wow.
Cool. We're happy to be here. And precognition is something that is so normal and so common and just isn't talked about. And it's so scientifically defensible that I'm looking forward to not very long from now when people will be using it as a normal part of their vocabulary, and they'll be using the information they get through precognition as a normal part of their lives to make their lives better. So that's what I'm excited about.
Cool. So really, let's tell the people that really what this book is it's a training course on learning to be what you call a positive precog.
But the scientific way, isn't it?
Let's tell everybody what that is and why they need the training.
Well, maybe you don't need the training. I mean, so a positive precog is someone who not only moves towards becoming more and more accurate in their precognition and controlling their precognition so that they can access it at certain times, at times that they want to access it, but it's also someone who uses that ability that they're honing to help the world. And some people are already doing both of those things. And I would call those people already positive precogs. Many, many, many people aren't doing both of those things and kind of just have precognitive dreams or know they have a certain skill during the day. They'll have a feeling or something, but they won't have sort of created a controlled precognition practice that allows them to hone that ability. And some people already are honing that ability, but they are not necessarily always applying it to make the world a better place. They might be applying it to, simply for financial gain, which isn't necessarily bad, but it doesn't necessarily always help make the world a better place either. And so the book is about saying, look, there's this real skill, and we can help you develop it in a controlled way with ethical and with certain worldviews that allow you to navigate some of the difficulties that can happen, especially with people who come from families with mental illness. You can get kind of delusional, thinking about looking into the future. It can be very tricky. So how to navigate that, and then how to actually, the practical nuts and bolts of how do you actually hone this ability. And so we provide a website at thepremonitioncode.com where we're training people through a scientific process of step-by-step. There's 6 steps we take people through, and they can train as much as they want, and they can practice, but they can also test themselves. So there's 2 portions. Yeah. So you could choose whether, okay, is this a practice time, or is this a now I'm going to let my scores count time? And if people get up to a score that shows that they're significantly better than chance, so basically scientifically, whatever is going on with them seems to be actually precognitive, then they get into the Hall of Fame. And that's just a way to support people in really honing their ability.
I must point out the website is free. It is almost like a scientific experiment. And in my mind, I don't know if Julia agrees, but I feel very much this is, for me, all the people who write to me. And I can tell you over the years, I've lost count of the number of people who write to me. Well, if psychic powers were real, why has nobody won James Randi's $1 million prize, the psychic challenge? And I'm hoping that this will be a kind of an answer to it. This is a kind of to replace it in some ways, because the problem with Randi for me is that he wasn't a scientist. And I think scientists should be testing people for psychic or paranormal ability. That's
right. I agree. I think that Randi's challenge, I kind of don't care about it, because what matters in the world of science is not whether some guy thinks that someone's impressed him with something and pays them
it's just generally that is for me as a writer for the general reader, that is thrown at me. I can almost every interview really. When there's a skeptic on, is that is the standard thing, and I got so tired of it, and that's why I began to seek out scientists, because so often people will say, "Where's the science? Where's the science? Where's the proof?" So I literally, Patrick, you've known me a while. I went out to try and find the proof.
Oh, people throw it at Teresa. People throw it at me when I give talks at universities. Even scientists will throw it at me.
Yeah.
And I'll say, like, since when is this random guy's challenge the arbiter of what you think is actually scientifically reasonable?
So we are hoping to have we expect very, very few people to actually make it through the rigor of it. But that's not the point. If you don't, I haven't passed the tests, and I'm quite precognitive. So, but what it is that actually training and working through it actually will help you and improve your intuition and everything. And being a precog in training is just as valuable in my mind as someone who actually will make the Hall of Fame, because some people will. Mm-hmm. But those people will be fascinating to study, to work with as well. It's a fascinating global experiment. Julia is very visionary like that she's trying to set up through this book and this website. to have a community of global precogs. How exciting is that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it really, I mean, when Theresa says it's almost an experiment, what we decided to do was just make it one. So we actually have a consent form and people can choose whether they want to be part of the experiment or not.
And if you get to the Hall of Fame, you're a scientifically validated precognitive.
Yep.
I love that you guys give the reader permission to refer to themselves as practicing positive precogs or
PPs.
I love it. It made me feel so special. I was like, okay.
Yes.
I am a positive precog in training, and I'm in this course, and I'm going to make a badge. And
yeah, why not?
Julia will be printing out the badges.
Yes, membership cards.
There's nothing like having a community to normalize something that should have been normalized a long time ago.
Not just having these blinding visions, is it, Julia? It's also about having dreams that come true or having a sense something's going to happen. I think people think they're going to have this big vision of the future and everything. It's not just that. It's all of us have had dreams that have played out in real life. What's going on there?
Yeah. So everyone who contacts me about their dreams or their daily experience and even mundane things, I just knew that my name was going to be called and I would win that award or whatever it is. I say to them, those are really great. They're like little free samples. You got a free sample, but what it's telling you is that there's something there you can access on a more regular basis. And what's fun is to turn those free samples that you can't control into a practice that you can control. And then you can actually use it to help the world. You can use it in situations where there's a missing person. You can use it in situations where people are trying to avoid a particular future event. You could use it to make money. You could use it to help your friends figure out what they want to do for their lives. I mean, there's lots of different ways you could use that skill. And so you can turn the free samples into something that really matters.
Well, speaking of dreams, you have quite a few stories in the book of premonitions coming to people in dreams. And both of you in the book say that you're having precognitive dreams as often as every other week. So is this how it happens most of the time?
Most. So, we sort of know the answer to that question through surveys and questionnaires that scientists send out every so often in different countries to find out what is the most common type of precognitive experience. And so based on those, it looks like dreams are the most common type of precognitive experience. Most people, when you start talking about precognition, will tell you about a dream they had. Some will tell you about a waking experience, and fewer still will tell you about a very accurate deja vu type. I knew she would say this, and then she said that. No matter what people tell you about as a scientist, first of all, it's fascinating. And second of all, if you're in an academic setting, they tend to try to tell you in private because they don't want their fellow colleagues to know that they're telling you this. And third, you can't ever verify that it's actually precognition, even if there are 16 relationships between the dream or vision or experience they had and what happened next, because there are all sorts of things we can read unconsciously about our environment and we don't know we're reading, right? And so you can have a dream that seems precognitive, like I dreamt the next day that my kid would be sick and my kid was sick. But who knows, unconsciously the day before you could have heard the kid cough, but you didn't register it, right? So that's why we had to take these things into the lab and we take them into online experiments where we could use random number generators to present a future event that the person couldn't possibly have known about to see if they could predict that. That's where we go with that so that we can actually verify it.
So talk to us about your criteria that you have in the book for knowing if you're experiencing genuine precognition. Because I thought that was cool that I'm very much into like bullets. I need to see it clearly out in front of me. And I loved it. I was like, cool. I'm going to know if I'm faking myself out or not.
We give that in the book, don't we? We give a list of criteria, don't we, Julia, about, the number of not too long period of time, number of accuracy points, that kind of thing, don't we?
Yeah. It's kind of like this. It's like, those are sort of like rule of thumb criteria. So if your experience, whether it was a dream or a waking vision or just a feeling that came to be meaningful to you, if your experience has at least 2 correspondences with the event that then ends up occurring, if it's within days or 1 week of the event that ends up occurring, if there's no way that you could have received information about that event through sort of unconscious means if you can't think of a way. Let me give you an example. Like, I will sometimes still, as a lifelong nerd and student, I will have dreams that the next day I'm going to fail a final exam, even though I've been out of, graduate school for years. I'm going to fail a final exam the next day. Well, I have that dream like once every other week still, even though I'm 49. It's pathetic. But if the next day someone contacts me and we have a discussion and I don't answer a question correctly, sometimes I'll think, oh, I had the dream about the final exam and look, I failed it. That would not be precognition because, one, there aren't two correspondences. Two, that's the kind of thing, I know I have that dream every other week. Like it's just regular. So it doesn't really work. On the other hand, if I dream that I'm in a conversation with someone and they ask me a question, and the person I'm in a conversation with is wearing a red dress, and she asks me a question about quantum mechanics and I can't answer it. And then the next day I run across a person that I wasn't planning to have a conversation with and that I've never met before, and she's wearing a red dress and she has a conversation with me about quantum mechanics and I can't answer the question. Then I say that dream was precognitive. So the number of correspondences that you couldn't have predicted ahead of time really matters. And then the duration matters just because the more time after you have a dream or experience, the more time there is for many, many things to happen to you. So if you dream of a plane crash and then a year later there's a plane crash, it's really hard to say, okay, that was precognitive unless you dreamt of like the flight number and the number of people on board and you need more correspondences the longer away that thing is from your experience. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
What about, butterflies in the stomach and anxiety? How does that play into this picture? Is it the same or is there a difference between premonition and anxiety?
Yes. Without doubt, there is a difference. It is extremely hard sometimes to know when there is. There's also very hard to know the difference between premonition and wishful thinking. And we do cover that in the book, that there's certain things to look for. Typically, for me, it's just when it's anxiety, there are lots of questions swirling around in your mind. However, when it's precognition, there's a quiet knowing. Even if the news is bad, it's just a quiet knowing without pressing questions and issues. And the same with wishful thinking. There's just a quiet knowing, a calm.
Yeah. So
if you're having a great deal of anxiety, for me, that wouldn't be precognition. If it's making you feel upset or physically ill, I associate, for me personally, as it probably manifests different for everyone, it's a quiet calm that just seems to come out of nowhere and out of the blue. Because typically anxiety is something we're thinking about anyway.
So I would say that there's a quiet knowing. I agree with Theresa on that, but sometimes that quiet knowing can lead you to action. And to me, there's a difference between sort of obsession, going over and over again, what am I going to do, that anxious sort of obsessive feeling, and the kind of knowing that leads to action. So I'll give you an example that I think I talk about in the book. When my son came home from school and I started yelling at him, which I normally don't do, he's a really good kid, and I started getting really upset about him because I asked him if he had locked the garage door after he put his bike in the garage. And he said, I don't know, I can't remember. It's not like we lived in a horrible neighborhood. But for the first time in my life, I pressed him and pressed him and pressed him. And finally, I just said, okay, fine, I'm going out, to check myself. And I went to the garage to check, and the door was indeed locked. And on my way back, I saw that the fire had broken out at the electrical meter right outside our house. And on the other side of that fire was my husband's oxygen tank because he was having a breathing disorder. And if I hadn't gone out to check on the bike, I wouldn't have seen the fire. And so I immediately shut down the electricity. But to me, when you have an anxious premonition, or you feel like you're feeling anxious and it might be a premonition, if it doesn't lead you to action, that means that that calm, knowing voice isn't strong enough, and it's probably just anxiety. If it leads you to action, then you just do it, even if you feel like you're going to be a fool. I felt like kind of foolish.
Make you stuck or frozen.
Yeah.
If it makes you stuck and paralyzed and frozen, and which way should I run? That way, and indecision and inaction. However, a precognition, as well as that calm, as Julia says, it leads you to actually take action or to do something or to change direction because you feel called to do that.
Yeah. Well, Theresa, that happened the other night with our publicist.
That's amazing, wasn't it? That because I WhatsApped Julia and I said, did you know, because someone we're very fond of made a decision to leave the company, and I said to Julia, oh, did you know? And she said, oh my goodness, I phoned him saying you're leaving, didn't you, Julia?
And I phoned him that night before we got that email saying, it was so clear to me that he was leaving. It's as if I had already received the email. So I just called him and I said, John, this may sound weird, but I really get that you're leaving and I'm really sorry. And we're really going to miss you. And I've really enjoyed working with you. And if I'm wrong about this, I will feel foolish, but I really feel like that's true. And I want you to know, and it's that kind of thing. I was so confident of it that it led to the action. And I feel like precognition, when it's working well, leads to action and leads to making you feel freer in your life and more like you're capable of doing things and more like you're in touch with what's going on. But when you're having that anxiety, sort of rumination and obsession, that feels just like kind of a trap.
Now, that knowing that person was leaving their job, did that come in a dream, or was that just a kind of a knowing that happened for you?
Now I still have a lot of precognitive dreams, but knowing happens now during the day almost all the time. So every day or more than once a day, I'll have an experience like that where I just know something is true, and it no longer feels like that big a deal. I mean, it's just very helpful, but it doesn't. I don't want to glorify it as, oh, I'm special in this way, because I'm not. Everyone can have this experience. It's a matter of how I practice every day. I practice controlled precognition every day. And when I don't, my husband says, go in your room and do this, because it changes my mood. It's like, it's like working out, So I do believe anyone can have this experience, and it's extremely helpful, but you do have to decide you're going to commit to it.
So I have 40 questions that I'd love to ask that we're not going to have time for, but I do think it's important to get into some of the best scientific evidence that we have to date of the reality of precognition. And this is actually one of the questions that's in a kind of FAQ at the end of your book. So you give us some of those current scientific evidence?
I'm going to quickly jump in there because obviously this is Julia's, but you are talking to the person who is collating that scientific evidence and has presented it. I mean, as I say in my acknowledgements, Julia is the future of this kind of research. So I do feel very honored to have worked on this with her, because she is pushing it forward. She, for me, is the science right now.
Well, good, because I want to know about the future too. So I'll combine those questions. And actually the future question, one of my dear listeners, Karen Prine, specifically wanted to ask this question for you guys. And that is, how, where's the research leading, and how do you think this will benefit mankind in the future?
Well, I want to thank Theresa Theresa is such a powerful supporter of this work and a generous supporter of this work. And Theresa, thanks for your vote of confidence. I think my work is good. I don't want to denigrate my work, but there are a dozen or so scientists around the world who are also doing this work, who are also help leading this forward in various different ways. And we all have different kinds of personalities.
They're all guys, Julia, and we need a time lady. We need a time lady.
Some of them are women, many of them are guys. Yeah, such is the nature of science still.
Yes.
Okay, let's go step by step. So, best scientific evidence for precognition. So there's two ways to sort of go about answering that question. One is to talk about all the different meta-analyses, which are the gathering together of similar studies and the statistical analysis of how. But I mean, if I start going down there, like, everyone's asleep. So let me just give the more concise response, which is that when scientists who don't think that this stuff is real or useful at first blush, when they start to read the data and they start to look at the different experiments that have been done over the last 3 or 4 decades in this area, and the way in which the community that does these experiments we have been checks and balances on each other, trying to make the methods better and better and better and better, those scientists start to get pretty impressed with the field. So any scientists who have read the literature, some of our best supporters in the literature have come from people who at first were like, oh, this has to be all crazy. And then they look into it and they're like, wait, you're doing this? And wait, this is what clinical, medicine does. Well, wait, this is what physicists, this kind of thing is what physicists do. It's because we're trying to make the field better and better. So some of the best evidence comes from physiology experiments. I did a meta-analysis of those showing that basically before a randomly picked event happens, like something exciting, there's someone on a roller coaster versus showing someone a picture of like a cat sitting on a floor, which is not very exciting. You can look at the physiological responses leading up to one of the or other of those kind of experiences, and you can see a significant difference between them, even though those experiences are randomized. And you can see this over and over again. And it's been shown in actually 26 studies. And not only in humans, but now it's been shown in birds and in little planaria worms. You're not showing them pictures because they can't see, but you're playing a really loud sound at random times, and the worms scrunch up in response to the sound after the sound, but they also scrunch up before the sound, even though the sound is randomized, and they scrunch up before the sound more than they scrunch up before periods where the sound isn't played. So there's something going on, and it's totally evolutionarily adaptive, if you think about it, to be able to predict the future with your body. And it's kind of adaptive to not consciously know that you're doing that, because if you think of it this way, what would it be like if you consciously knew the next thing that was going to happen all the time? It would, first of all, be very confusing. What's happening now versus what's happening in the future? I don't know how you figure that out. And second, you might freak out. If you knew a lion was about to jump out at you, it might not be very good for you to know that consciously, but it could be great for your adrenaline to start going. It could be great for your body to get in the mood to start running, right? Or freezing, or whatever the appropriate thing to do is with a lion. So anyway, that's the. I mean, there's more evidence than that, but that's an example.
Right, where that it's almost impossible, I'm sure, to ask you this question in this time frame.
Yeah. But basically, serious scientists are working on it. They're getting grants. I know of at least 5 scientists at mainstream institutions who are doing this kind of work, but they're in the closet. So these are large institutions.
Patrick, I mean, it's incredible. The science of the paranormal is out there. And as I said, this is relatively new, really, and gathering pace now with people like Dr. Julia, who are bringing it forward. And your Transcendent Mind, the study that she worked on as well, was one of the first was the first, wasn't it, Julia, but by the American Psychological Association to acknowledge, transcendent states as worth studying and investigating. And I just think that's so exciting. Because, as I said, for years I've been writing about this, and to know that there are scientists like Dr. Mossbridge out there, like Dean Radin, like people like that, it kind of validates what I've been doing and what many other writers in my field have been doing, and it's just that's why I'm so passionate about it. I'm trying to explain my passion for it, because it comes from a lifetime of having written about this, but from an anecdotal belief perspective or a spiritual perspective. And I love the idea that science and spirit are merging here.
It's interesting, like precognition doesn't have to have, when you think about it scientifically, it's just getting information from the future. It doesn't have to have anything spiritual about it. But no. practicing controlled precognition in an attempt to try to do something useful with it starts to make you think about spiritual things, or I'll just speak for myself, makes me think about spiritual things more than I did before I started practicing it. I don't know why that is. I do think there's some kind of relationship between how we think about time and how we think about sort of the nature of the universe and what's going on. So definitely it can change your worldview, I think.
Well, paranormal abilities for me point to the eternal part of us, the supernormal part of the extraordinary part of us that somehow can exist outside of our body as well. That's an endless fascination for me, and a theme in my books as well. And the fact that science is starting to tentatively prove the possibility of that being real is beyond exciting.
It's kind of random and somewhat unrelated, or a lot unrelated, but I'm curious to know, Julia, what your general thoughts are on the afterlife, since we're sitting here in the big seance parlor.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, even if we're not in the big seance parlor, I get asked that question a lot because once you start thinking, okay, are we connected over time to our future selves? Then it's like, well, are we connected over death to our future selves? It's a reasonable question, right? You start to see yourself as more than just this being who's sitting right here. So my thoughts on the afterlife are aesthetically, and then there's scientifically. So aesthetically, I would really like it if after we die, our consciousnesses or whatever you want to call it, or spirits or whatever the thing is that makes us us, that's not our bodies, if that kind of went into a bowl of soup and got stirred around with a big spoon, and then it got recycled into some ladles that went out into other bodies, but it wasn't necessarily us. It was like us plus, Aretha Franklin plus, whatever, like little pieces, like a carrot here and a potato there, aesthetically, that really appeals to me. Scientifically, I'm aware that there's evidence from the Windbridge Institute, just excellent evidence of mediumship showing that mediums can get verifiable information about dead people, even though they're blind to who they're getting the information about. So that's really interesting in terms of survival of consciousness or survival of personality. I'm aware that there's some excellent reincarnation work where whole people, that would be like the entire piece of meat, goes from one life to another. There's some pretty interesting childhood reports of reincarnation. But what I want to be the case is that the personality doesn't remain intact, just because I feel like personalities are so culture bound and they're so time bound, and it just feels non-eternal, whereas consciousness feels eternal.
Theresa, I will always forever remember Julia's visual of the afterlife as a vegetable soup. I love it.
This is what I had to put up with when we were writing.
That's true.
Never would I have ever had that visual in my mind, and it's now going to always be there. Thank you.
Next time you have vegetable soup. Yes. No. Yeah. No. I mean... Well, you don't need to know my thinking on the afterlife from the work I've done with, and I'm glad Julia mentioned the Windbridge Institute as well. So that's my thinking as well about it. I just think that what we're trying to show in the book is this extraordinary possibility, and we do come at it from different angles, and that's the beauty of it. But it is mainly a presentation of the science out there to show people that there is science out there. That's for me.
What did we not get a chance to talk about that you really want to get out there in the last few minutes, both of you?
I think for me, and then I'll leave the last word to Julia, as should be, because this is a presentation of the science. I just think this book is kind of one of the first of its kind to try and attempt to do what we're doing. And like anything that's new, people are going to, when you read it, it's tough read. It's not going to be what you expect. It's totally different from any other book about intuition out there. And that's what I love about it. Because when we were writing it, there was a point when I was writing it, well, should I go down the standard route that I do with my books? We're now going to talk about intuition exercises. We're going to talk about dream interpretation. We're going to have lots of reader stories to validate it. And that's what most of my books are. This book, I'm telling you, will take such a different direction from what my readers are used to for me. And I love that about this book. It is so utterly unique. You will not in your lifetime read a book quite like it. And on that tantalizing note, I will hand over to Julia now.
Wow, thanks, Theresa. I guess on the last note, I just want to encourage people to, notice, just start to be aware of, notice if you're afraid of your precognition. Because a lot of people who are interested in this are sort of interested in it like they're interested in driving by a train wreck and slowing down and looking at it and then going and see, you know what I mean? and I want to say it can make your life so nice, and it can be so helpful. And the less you're afraid of it, the more it will show up. And why not use this skill that has been given to us, that our bodies know things, and why not learn things that work for us? I'm not saying you should know everything your body knows, because that would be a nightmare, but just learn the things that work for you and learn how to use them, and just notice your fear about it and know that that's okay. And there are ways for you to in a controlled, sane, non-delusional way, get real-time feedback. That's what the point of our website is, to give you real-time feedback on how did you do in that single controlled precognition session. How did you do? And then do the next one, so that there's no guesswork around all this stuff. It's actually, pretty cut and dried, and it's just a practice.
And I am going to jump in there because I can't help it. I'm going to say, don't beat yourself up if you find you're not doing as well as you'd like. We'd all like to sort of like have a just stunningly high score, because the very fact that you're working on this and thinking about it, precognition works that way. The more it's always like that in life, the more you focus on things and think about it, you will be making progress. Give yourself time.
Yeah, I mean, even as I'm building this website and I see the kind of things I'm challenging people to do, I'm thinking my score is not going to be that high when I do this, because
better than mine, Julia.
Well, maybe, but when I don't know. But I'm doing this in a new way, or creating a new way to ask people to have these controlled precognitions, and it's very challenging. And I'm going to have to train myself to do it in this particular way too, just like everyone else. And it just takes time, but it's really worth it, because what you're doing is you're telling your brain, you're telling your mind, this is important to me, and I want to get good at it. And just by telling your mind that, it helps you get good at it.
Yeah. And be so exciting, however long it takes, to actually like talk to people who are really excelling at it, and to just hear their thoughts and these people will be fascinating to study and to listen to, I think, as well. Maybe giving us advice or help in some way, the planet. I mean, that's a big vision, but.
That reminds me, Theresa, I wanted to talk about the Positive Precog Council. So we have this vision in the book. We talk about creating a new kind of economy called the Precog economy, which is where people actually acknowledge that precognition is useful, and they pay precogs to help, just in a job. Your job is to help this car company avoid crashes, or your job is to help the UN, deal with terrorism, or whatever it is. I was thinking of a Positive Precog Council, and Theresa's into this idea too. I think, Theresa, unless you think it's too far out. But
it is far out, but I don't mind far out. I just love the idea. And there are actually some people, and a few we mention in the book, because we've got many, many rich case histories of people who are actually doing that kind of work in a way already.
Yes, like Stephen Schwartz.
And like that.
The idea of helping a car company try to prevent crashes. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God, that's right. That part of the book was like a giant aha moment for me. That was such a cool, futuristic idea.
Cool. So glad you like that. There's all sorts of things like that, right? Can't hospitals have, precogs on their staff who, oh wait, everyone get a bunch of doctors who understand overdose in this room at this time. Go. Just like it could be very helpful.
As I said, prepare to have your mind stretched and everything turned upside down when you read this book.
So the site that we keep talking about is the premonitioncode.com, correct?
Exactly. It launches October the 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And, you ladies rock so much. And I do recommend this book. I did very much enjoy the book. And again, I'm still celebrating that my head didn't explode and I, kind of comprehended it, or most of it, or some of it. Maybe not even most of it, some of it. But it didn't, I didn't want to throw it across the room or out the window like I do some books that get kind of scientific.
It's totally different from a lot of books in this field. I know that for sure, having written so many. But this book is one-off, utterly unique.
Thanks, Theresa. I agree. I think it's a pretty cool book, and I'm glad you didn't want to throw it away. But if you did throw it away, I just hope that you would go pick it up and keep reading.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm too OCD, and I'm addicted to shelving my books after I read them. So there's no... I'm very materialistic when it comes to my books. I treasure them. So, and again, the book is The Premonition Code. So I definitely recommend it. Well, thank you, ladies. You rock.
Thank you, Patrick. You rock.
For more on Theresa Cheung, visit her site at theresachung.com. And Dr. Julia wanted me to make sure you knew that she has information on controlled precognition webinar classes on her website if you're interested. Also, she has a new book coming out in April called The Calling, a science-based program to discover, energize, and engage your soul's work. You can find info on both of these things at mossbridgeinstitute.com and premonitioncode.com.
International Podcast Day is September 30th, and you can help spread the word. You may be asking, what can I do to get involved? It's pretty simple. Head over to internationalpodcastday.com and check the suggestions. Then use hashtag International Podcast Day to join the conversation. You can reach out and connect with other podcasters, listeners, and your favorite podcast hosts. Remember September 30th, International Podcast Day, a day-long celebration of the power of podcasts.
Thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Diana Lloyd, Natalie, Amy Park Gedicke, Sonia B., Jenny Becker, Bianca Roth, Kim Robb, Jim Budd, David Rubenstein, Josiel Lorenzo, and Susan Davey. My supporters at the Parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are astrologer Dina DeCastro, Margaret Hagan, Sharon Bowles, Marion Hover Clairvoyant, Miranda, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, Denise Sia, Anna Frias, Norman and Linda Keller, and Karen Prine. And here we go. I told you I'd have fireworks. Jeffrey Peck is my supporter at the $20 level. And there's not even a level for that. So thank you, Jeffrey. Well, my favorite season is approaching, and I don't even have my Halloween things out yet. I've seen in the Big Seance Parlor that so many of you have already been at it, and it's full-blown autumn in your homes. So it's clear that I'm a little behind. I'll see you next time as I bring astrologer Dina DeCastro back on the show. Peace out.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.